Good morning. This is Ursula, and it's day one of Awakening Your Wisdom Body. And today we're going to be diving into Sophia, Soul of the World. So whether you are listening live or later, I encourage you to take a moment and just actually feel your body. Feel your belly. Feel your breath, right? We're going to be talking and using words, but this is actually about how all of these energies, these faces of spirit, these archetypes live in our bodies and in the world. So we want to do the connecting work to feel them and not just think about them. So Sophia is the ground and the container of the Sophia Cycle. If you haven't already gotten my free download about that, I'll put the link down after so you can read and get the yummy, juicy initial insight into what this whole thing is. But to say briefly, it is a mandala or a whole picture of aspects of embodied feminine power that are talking about how all the ways we need to connect to aspects of power to work together, and how we do that through pleasure. And why that's needed now is, we're in a reckoning moment. And that moment is this transition between patriarchal and other, forms of oppression and control that have been in play, right, for thousands of years. And those forms of power are power over. Right? They are power that seeks to control, to repress, to sway, to, threaten, and often causes, a lot of actual harm in the process. And that's what's held up as power. And yet, so many of us, right, are rising up to deeper knowing that we find within ourselves, that we find in community, that we find in the earth. And we can feel that there's something powerful about that, but it looks different than power over, right? It's power within and power together. And my work and my passion is centered on how do we access that in the body? How do we get there? And how do we get there in a way that feels really good? Not just feel good, but that actually utilizes pleasure and connection as the tool to get there, right? So we're not just trying to work harder to get there and be more powerful, but how do we actually connect to those places and open up to the vitality, to the genius, to inspiration, to all that we need to flow through us so that we can bring and create this mutual vision of a better, more harmonious earth, right? That's what we want. And we need all of our voices. We need all of our dreams. We need all of our visions to come together. So today, Sophia is the ground of that. The wounding that we hold, the pain around Sophia, is the feeling of being isolated, of being cut off from the rest of life. And not only cut off, but this idea that the body, that matter, that the earth is not alive, that it's not conscious, that it's just inert matter, that it's the source of sin, that there's nothing alive about it. And as we are dealing with all of these huge changes, if we are still stuck in the place of feeling like, but I'm just one human, how can I make a difference? Or how can I can't save the world, or it's just too much, right? And just this feeling of being alone, that is endemic in our modern world. So the medicine of Sophia, right? Well, actually, let's jump back to that for a second. And so then when we feel alone, we can isolate more from what's happening, right? Because it just feels like, but I can't do anything about it. what do I have to offer? It's just too much, right? So this actually like this idea that we are actually alone in the world then creates more isolation because we just feel like we can't deal. So the medicine to this is to come into relationship again with the living consciousness of the world, right? To understand that all life is consciousness, that all life comes from spirit, that all life is infused with awareness and with vitality and with wisdom. And we don't get to this by thinking about it, right? We get to this by actually engaging with the beauty of the world. And that looks like small practices, right? It looks like small bites where we cultivate what we find beautiful, not in the sense of like the consumerist lie around like, I'm going to sell you beauty and you have to live up to this like weird Western standard. It's actually what are the small bits in my daily life? Where is there beauty and how can I honor it? How can I create more? How can I bring more loving presence to the world in small, actionable ways, right? And to see how that becomes a reciprocal relationship, what we receive out of that, right? We're not giving from our empty here. We're actually connecting with like what is beautiful and juicy, but in small ways, you know, like if you, on your commute to work, like a lot of people around here, right, might take a train to work. And so they might walk to the BART station and then notice what you can about what is beautiful on your way there, just the small things. There may be ugliness too. Like I think the world is always going to have some ugliness. So not ignoring it or bypassing it, but actually focus on like, where is there aliveness in the world around me? How can I stop and connect with it? And so this is reclaiming beauty as a transformative and nourishing practice, right? Taking beauty back from a consumerist culture that wants to sell us some like weird, completely unrealistic idea of beauty, but bringing it back home to our bodies. Because without beauty, right, we're in despair. We're in despair. And so I invite you, you know, an inquiry is to say, like, what is it that you find beautiful about the world? It doesn't have to be like don't necessarily think big and epic. Think like, who are the people in your life that you find really beautiful? Is there any plant or flower that you love? Do you have a favorite cup that you like to drink out of? Small things, right? But to name that and to begin to notice what is beautiful. Because, you know, what's a favorite song that really like infuses you? That's very real. Like, where would we be without, you know, music and art? So beauty, that's part of Sophia. A second piece of Sophia is a relationship with grief, what I call the grief channel. So, you know, there are some aspects of human experience that are deemed, you know, acceptable by modern Western culture, and other ones that we have very little acceptance or emotional intelligence or awareness of why they're important or how to even approach them with support and resources, right? So, like, it's, you know, acceptable to feel happy, or it's acceptable to, I don't know, be succeeding. It's not very acceptable to be angry, right? And many of us, especially women, but many of us have learned to suppress that, so much so that we can't even access the feeling when there is something that's actually super appropriate to be angry about, right? And the same thing with grief, right? Grief is a deep and unavoidable part of being human. Being human means that we will experience loss of people and other creatures that we love, um, loss of periods of our life that we may find, you know, beautiful. There's just, it's part of being human that we will experience loss. And yet, there's so much fear around the loss, so much fear that it's repressed and there's no way to experience. And what that does is it doesn't mean it goes away. It means like it gets like backlogged in our body. It gets jammed up so that our body becomes sort of this swamp of unmetabolized emotion, right? Just like you like need, like when you take in food, you need not just, you need to chew it, you swallow it, and then your body metabolizes it through various processes, right? It's not enough just to like put food in your mouth and sit there like it's not going to go anywhere and you might choke, right? Or even the chewing and swallowing it. If it didn't do anything else, it would just sit in your belly unmetabolized, right? So there's a way that all experience and emotion has ways for it to be metabolized in our body in good ways, in ways that are helpful, right? And when it does, even when it's hard stuff, it means that our life force can flow. It means that that channel is open. When it doesn't, it begins to back up and back up and back up and becomes this swamp in our body. And we have less vitality, we have less joy, right? We think like, oh, I don't want to feel the grief because I just want to be happy. I just want to feel the good things. But this is a setup for more suffering because the human deal is to feel it all. Now, it doesn't mean you need to feel it all on your own. That's not what we're meant to do either. I'm not saying like you have to just go like dive into the swamp of grief without, support. Absolutely. We need connection. We need ritual. We need ways of acknowledging and being able to safely express, right? In a container. And by container, for those of you, if that sounds like a strange word, it's, a setting with intention where people are coming together and there's understood agreements about why we're there. So there's all different kinds of containers, women's circles, a church or temple group, all kinds of things, right? So container gives us a space to go into something that may feel too overwhelming on our own, but is really needed. So grief, right? And we're dealing with a lot of grief right now, right? From our own personal experiences to all the things we see every day on Facebook, on social media, on the news, in our communities that are hard stuff. Like there's no getting around that. There's hard stuff. But the possibility that Sophia offers us is when we re-embrace our connection with the earth, with the world, with the aliveness present, when we stop feeling all alone. And that's a process, right? Because we've been like trained to feel otherwise. But when we're trained, when we begin to, cultivate that connection and that reciprocity and feeling like we are actually a part of something, right? You've probably heard like the web of life. We are a part of the web of life, and we always have been. We've just trained ourselves to think we're not. We can then, I lost my train of thought, but take a deep breath. We can then begin to make space for the unfelt grief, right? For the unfelt grief. And what happens is the other side of that is a new way of living with our hearts broken open. Do you remember, in The Grinch, right? The Grinch at the end, his heart grew 3 sizes that day. And they say grew, but I think that his heart had to break open from realizing his disconnection to the world that he lived in and how he was not able to see the beauty and the joy or feel like how he could be a part of it, right? So the Grinch begins to see. And when he does, his heart breaks open and it expands, right? Just the way like a snake has to shed that skin. They have to crack open that version of their self to let the new one, come through and take up space, right? Our hearts are so huge. Our hearts are so huge. And they have a lot of room. But we need them to break open with love and with support and in sisterhood. So If you are taking notes or writing things down, I'd love for you to just make a note of like, what is the grief in your life that you haven't felt like you could make space for? You don't have to like go into all of the feelings of it right now. I think again, right, a good container for that is really important. And that's part of what I do with people, is that strong container for all, the emotions and energies that don't necessarily feel like they're acceptable in other places. But to begin to know for yourself, what is the grief that I haven't felt like I've had the space to, make room for? And what might be possible, even if you don't know how to get there yet, on the other side? Like, what could open up in your body, in your heart, and your soul if you were living from that place of being broken open in connection, in love with other humans and the rest of the world? So, the third piece of Sophia that I want to touch into today is our body wisdom. So, when we talk about Sophia being the soul of the world, we can also understand that she is the consciousness in all matter, and that includes the matter of our bodies, right? And what I envision is that we're in a period of time when perhaps the consciousness in every cell and every molecule has been maybe a little bit asleep, not always, or at least to our own human Western perception has been kind of asleep in a way. And this awakening process that we're in, this transformational, threshold that we're working towards and crossing, it's like that every little molecule is has the potential to be like a golden lotus, to unfold from a little seed into a beautiful golden lotus, or a flame, right? A beautiful flame of consciousness. That's true about, my desk and the tree and my body and every living thing, every part of the world, every aspect of the world, right? And body wisdom, right? So that means, so what if, feeling into like, what if I could trust what my body's telling me? What if I knew how to listen to her properly? What if I could slow down enough to begin to explore not just living from the thoughts in my head, right? Because we've been taught to live from our heads, but really the head is not meant to be the director of things. The head is meant to be in loving service to like the energies of our heart and our pelvis, our creativity, our vitality, our erotic fires, our deep love and passion. So we're kind of lopsided as, Western culture right now, where the head, it's like been taught that it's the driver. And that does all kinds of crazy things, right? It doesn't work really well. But when the head feels, held by the heart, when it feels warmed by the fires of vitality and passion and desire and love, then it begins to be able to be this like creative force that's really beautiful and juicy. And I want to share a little story here. When I was in my 20s, and I was in the midst of exploring all kinds of things to do with the body, massage and sexuality and awakening and birth, I realized that like my body was talking to me in a specific way about like sometimes like nudging me. And it wasn't necessarily about like epic big things. It was about little things, like if I was packing to go somewhere for the day. I remember specifically I was packing one day to go to this like awesome hot spring called Ore in Northern California. And it was almost like a nudge or like a tap or like a feeling that was a visceral of when I looked at something that I didn't think I needed to pack, but it was like, no, like take that. And I actually don't remember if I brought it that day or not. But what I remember is that I did need it later, even though I didn't think so. And what that tipped me over into doing was to follow those nudges, right? That were at like they weren't in a level that there was a lot at stake. So I didn't have to worry about it, but I could just be like listening and listening and listening and following that. And then it's like the cup got filled. when there was this, threshold point of being able to listen more deeply and trust it more and go from there, so that my body went from being something that maybe I felt someone disconnected to or not fully present in, to something that I could listen to more and more, and I didn't have to have a, like, intellectual reason why, right? We're taught that we always need to intellectually know why something is. But the truth is, most of the time, what we feel passionate about, what we love, what we feel drawn to, it doesn't really make intellectual sense necessarily at first. It doesn't mean we have to go do things that are harmful because we felt a nudge. It's not like that. It's more like, what is pulling you? And can you trust that there's a bigger thing at play, right? That your longing is telling you something about how to show up for your life and where there's beauty and medicine and nourishment. So I'd love for you to jot down, like, is there a way that your body speaks to you? It can be super small, but is there like a nudge? Is there a like poke that you feel sometimes? It could even be, and this is the one that more people are familiar with, sometimes when we're in danger to varying degrees, we can feel like, oh, that felt yucky, right? We tell kids, like, if someone, teaching kids about their bodies and about privacy and about like who gets to touch them and who doesn't, we'll often say, like, if someone gives you a funny feeling in your stomach, you need to trust that and come to a safe adult, right? So that's a place that we may know is that place of like, oh, that doesn't feel right. That's a body signal too. So acknowledge that if that's one that you know. And then also feel, is there one that tells you where there's yum for you, where there's beauty for you, where there's connection for you? So I would love to, as you are able to see this, to send me questions that you have, what feels inspiring, what's an aha, how though these things are playing out in your life, grief and beauty and body wisdom. And also to know that, like I said at the beginning, today we're speaking a lot. These are a lot of words. And this is something that actually like comes home in our body through action, through practice, through setting aside time. And that is something that is my passion. That is something that I offer to the world, is sacred space for women to actually stop with the rest of their doing, right, in the world, and make time for what is important to them, and to get to be in direct contact, with these beautiful faces of spirit in the sacred feminine, these goddesses, these archetypes. So if that's something that you want to learn more about, I'm going to put a link and you can connect with me about that. I'd love to tell you what's coming up, my Empress Circle. And if that's something you're longing for, to have a deep space with other women, to really go into these places, to set aside sacred time and to be in direct contact, that's going to be really juicy, and that's coming up. And I'm excited to be in this conversation with you over the next 9 days. Please do invite any other women into the circle that you want to be part of this conversation at any time. And I will talk to you soon.